You are listening to the Objects of Affection collection. Study 44. Christian Poell, the alchemical designer, post-luxury's radical critique of materiality and the smooth society. Christian Poell stands not merely as an avant-garde figure within fashion, but as a critical theorist whose chosen medium for philosophical inquiry is the garment. Born in Linz, Austria, into a family steeped in the traditions of leather development, Poell possessed an innate understanding of material science from an early age. His formal training, initially centered on traditional tailoring, honed at the Costume Mitchell-Buin School for Tailoring and Dressmaking, before he expanded his knowledge of brand mechanics in Milan, culminating in his graduation from the Domus Academy in 1995. Upon establishing his label, he deliberately chose the impersonal acronym CCP, a move that signaled an immediate and profound detachment from the celebrity-driven cult of personality that underpins much of mainstream luxury. This detachment is not an accident of temperament, but a core structural component of his artistic practice. Poell is fiercely independent, elusive, and famously enigmatic, maintaining an uncompromising distance from the established fashion economy. His career, marked by a sporadic and unyielding production schedule, functions as a sustained critique of the field's unforgiving and consumerist nature. His core philosophy aligns precisely with the intellectual goals of the avant-garde, providing critical and self-reflective opinions about the system to which he belongs. The operational choice of elusiveness and the cultivation of the enigmatic CCP signifier represent a masterful application of narrative control through absence, a central tenet of the post-luxury framework. Traditional luxury relies heavily on the hypervisibility of the designer or the celebrity endorsement to project status. Poell strategically weaponizes withdrawal. By choosing to step away from the compulsory performance of interviews, endless collections, and social media visibility, he creates a conceptual vacuum around the author. This absence forces the audience and the market to focus exclusively on the object's material and structural truth. The scarcity of his public presence becomes a form of non-transferable cultural value, establishing a mystique that resists the rapid cycles of commodification faced by hypervisible brands. This strategic distancing is thus a profound rejection of overt status markers and the consumer expectation of seamless access, aligning perfectly with the post-luxury movement's preference for intrinsic worth over superficial signaling. Luster lost, meaning restored. CCP as post-luxury conceptual functional art exemplar. The intellectual project of Christian Poell can only be fully understood when positioned as a radical exemplar of post-luxury conceptual functional art. Post-luxury conceptual functional art. The post-luxury conceptual functional art framework emerged in response to the exhaustion of traditional luxury, a system hollowed out by the scarcity paradox, in which aggressive mass-market expansion destroyed the very rarity and exclusivity it sought to sell. This collapse fueled a quiet rebellion among discerning consumers suffering from price fatigue against logo-driven consumption. In this environment, post-luxury conceptual functional art shifts the central question of value from "what does it cost?" to "what does it mean?" CCP's practice directly addresses this crisis by anchoring value not in superficial aesthetics, but in philosophical depth, irreplicable labor, and material commitment. His garments, characterized by anti-fashion sensibilities and artisanal complexity, fundamentally defy conventional norms. This is achieved through a dedication to process that inherently resists the efficiency mandates of corporate fashion. The labor required to produce his collections establishes value derived from narrative, not price, satisfying post-luxury conceptual functional art pillar 2. Furthermore, his structures are inherently designed for permanence over disposability, serving as carriers of meaning across time and addressing post-luxury conceptual functional art pillar 3. The high valuation of Poell's work is justified by its profound philosophical engagement and the labor embedded in its structure, rather than by marketing budget or logo visibility. Corporate luxury, as diagnosed by critical theory, often prioritizes a Baudrillardian exchange value, monetary worth, decoupled from any material reality. By committing to intensive, painstaking, and frequently conceptually disturbing material transformations, Poell radically re-anchors the value equation. The consumer is asked to purchase the process and the story of the object, demanding a level of intellectual and financial commitment that resists the fluid, interchangeable nature of the mass-produced commodity form. This dedication to process and permanence establishes CCP as a pivotal figure in defining the material culture of the post-luxury world. The Alchemist's Workshop, Materiality as Philosophical Thesis, The Visceral Trace, Blood, Veins, and the Rejection of the Smooth Poell's methodology in the Milan atelier is not mere design. It is a form of industrial alchemy. His notorious techniques are characterized by visceral intensity, pushing materials to their physical and conceptual limits to embed a profound narrative into the garment's fabric. Among his rare and uncompromising techniques is object dyeing, in which the finished garment, fully constructed with all its seams and details, is dyed as a single unit, yielding unique, uneven colorations that conventional methods cannot replicate. More conceptually provocative are the techniques that engage directly with the material's biological history. Poell has employed methods such as injected dyeing, where paint is precisely injected through the veins of animal hides, leaving the finished leather with visible vascular networks that map the animal's living form onto the final garment. Most famously, for his 2005 womenswear collection, he used blood tanning, smothering the leather's interior with animal blood in a deliberate, ritualistic act intended to give life to what had once been alive. Additionally, incorporating materials such as human hair into coats and accessories further foregrounds the garment's raw, corporeal dimension. These techniques function as a radical material counter-manifesto against the hyperreality of luxury, a concept described by Jean Baudrillard. Traditional luxury operates by selling a sign, a logo, an image, divorced from the messy reality of production. It sanitizes materials, eliminating all traces of violence, chemical processing, or complex origin to present a pristine, flawless ideal. Poell deliberately reverses this sterilization. By exposing the veins and utilizing blood, he forces the reintroduction of the real, the undeniable visceral reality of the animal's life and death, into the luxury object. This ensures the object is not a simulacrum, a copy without an original, but a physical artifact imbued with the raw biological narrative of its source. This confrontation demands a deeper engagement from the wearer, facilitating what Baudrillard termed a symbolic exchange with the object's history, moving the transaction beyond mere monetary exchange value and into the realm of meaning. Art pauvres air, the political weight of unconventional materials. The Poellian use of unconventional and raw materials connects his practice directly to the art pauvre movement of the 1960s and 70s. Art pauvre, or poor art, was a political and aesthetic rebellion against the commodification of culture, championing the use of humble, everyday materials to critique the sanitized abstraction of high art. Poell expands this lineage by incorporating elements of the industrial and the grotesque into the realm of the highly refined. He integrates titanium alloy joints into the elbows and knuckles of his jackets and gloves, transforming the garments into protective shields, while intentionally restricting the wearer's joint mobility. This choice of hard, industrial material is echoed in the use of fiberglass and chain mail, alongside more unsettling conceptual pieces, such as a bag created from an entire pig in its original form. The deliberate selection of these raw, challenging, or provocative elements asserts that CCP is a direct spiritual successor to the material critique of art pauvre. Where art pauvre utilized simple industrial elements, coal, steel, to critique high art's distance from reality, Poell uses biological reality, blood, full animal form, and difficult industrial materials, titanium, to critique high fashion's superficiality. This methodology mirrors the work of the post-luxury conceptual functional art practitioner Robert Ebbendorf, who creates philosophical objects from discarded detritus. Poell's transformation of materials that are typically sanitized or discarded, a dead animal, raw metal prosthetics, into objects of extreme value, is an assertion that value resides in the intentionality of the transformation and the conceptual story it carries, rather than the material's intrinsic monetary preciousness. The use of the grotesque is thus essential, as it prevents the object from being absorbed easily into the conventional luxury aesthetic. The object's autonomy, self-edge, dead-end, and the scaffolding of critique Poell often engineers his garments to assert their own structural and conceptual identity, challenging the fundamental notion that clothing must serve solely to flatter or facilitate the body. His structural design is driven by philosophical proposition. The Self-Edge series, for instance, uses glued hems and complex construction, resulting in garments so stiff and uncomfortable that they can literally stand erect when placed on the ground. This rigidity underscores the concept that the garment possesses an autonomy independent of the wearer. Similarly, the Dead End series uses exposed seams, held together by tape or chain stitching, giving the material the appearance of being torn apart and metaphorically representing a conceptual dead end of the fashion system. The iconic spiral pants are a masterwork of deconstructive tailoring, modified and cut precisely so that the fabric twists around the leg like a bandage, forcing a re-evaluation of basic anatomical fit. By designing garments that are rigid and self-supporting, Poell deconstructs the body's primacy in fashion. The object asserts its structural and philosophical presence, suggesting it is a sculpture or conceptual tool first and clothing second. This deliberate act of giving the object autonomy, allowing it to possess a conceptual statement, the dead end, the self-edge, separate from the wearer's status signaling, is central to the post-luxury conceptual functional art tenet of the inseparability of concept and function. The function of these pieces is not just to clothe, but to make a structural argument, shifting the focus from the identity of the wearer to the truth contained within the object itself. The body as crucible, endurance and the aesthetics of resistance, the imposition of form. Discomfort as functional design. The most radical aspect of Poell's design philosophy is the intentional use of initial discomfort as a necessary functional component of the garment. His clothing is renowned for being rigid, often limiting the body's natural movement. This is pronounced in the self-edge construction and the use of hard titanium alloy joints that impede fluid motion, but serve as a protective layer. Poell's process dictates that the clothing is meant to be worn and used, and sometimes it can even hurt you until you have used it several times, as it's made to be comfortable over time. This initial rigidity transforms the act of wearing the garment into a performance of endurance. The utility of comfort is not provided immediately. It is earned through a sustained commitment of physical time and effort. This required struggle acts as the functional prerequisite for integration. The discomfort is not a design flaw, but a mechanism that elevates the passive consumer into an active steward of the object, deepening the essential, enduring bond required by the post-luxury conceptual functional art framework. By demanding a physical commitment, Poell guarantees that the object is not acquired lightly or discarded easily, fostering a non-transferable history of co-creation between the wearer and the material. Against the seamless interface, the burnout society and the drip sneaker, Poell's aesthetic of resistance finds a profound philosophical echo in the work of Byung-Chul Han, who critiques the smoothness and frictionless quality of late modern digital culture. Han argues that this relentless elimination of difficulty and resistance leads to the burnout society, characterized by an inability to manage negative experiences in an age defined by excessive positivity. The effortless, hyper-optimized experience of traditional luxury and fast fashion is precisely the aesthetic of the smooth society. The drip sneaker is the perfect material counter-manifesto to this frictionless mandate. These shoes feature hardened rubber stalactites dripping from the sole, which are initially uncomfortable and seemingly devoid of purpose. The rubber drips must be worn down over time, gradually transforming into a regular sneaker after approximately 5 uses. This transition from painful sculpture to functional footwear embodies the philosophical resistance Han champions. Poell forces the user to confront and work through the object's imperfection, demanding the essential negativity that the culture of convenience seeks to eliminate. The drip sneaker embodies the aesthetics of earned value, where value is generated through the user's perseverance. By demanding time and physical commitment, the garment functions as cultural therapy against acceleration, ensuring the object is experienced as a dynamic vessel of meaning rather than a static symbol of wealth. The patterner of commitment, wabi-sabi and the perfection of imperfection, the design philosophy that champions transformation through use, finds a deep non-Western philosophical parallel in the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi. This aesthetic system values beauty that is imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete, emphasizing authenticity, simplicity, and the profound acceptance of the traces of time and wear. CCP's commitment to permanence and material transformation is rooted in this principle. His garments are explicitly designed to be lived with and to embrace the inevitable wear and tear. The rigid leathers soften, the self-edge structures yield, and the spiral pants eventually conform to the unique movement of the individual body. This commitment to allowing the garment to become more comfortable and aesthetically compelling through use reveals the post-luxury ethos not as a fleeting modern reaction, but as a commitment to a timeless, universal philosophy. By anchoring the critique of Western consumerism in the wisdom of wabi-sabi, which values the history of an object's existence over its pristine, manufactured state, the post-luxury conceptual functional art thesis gains a robust, universal context. The focus on transformation over time reinforces the idea that the object's true worth lies in its narrative capacity to carry meaning through its journey with the steward. Scarcity, simulacrum and systemic rebellion, the custodial strategy of absence and post-growth economics. Christian Poell's operational model is inseparable from his philosophical critique. His elusiveness and enigmatic nature are maintained to fiercely protect his creative process and to constantly criticize the field's unforgiving, consumerist nature. He adheres to a production schedule governed by conceptual readiness, only producing and presenting creations when the time had to feel right, rejecting the forced, relentless pace of the seasonal fashion calendar critiqued elsewhere in the Objects of Affection collection. This strategic choice is a practical implementation of the post-growth imperative. The mainstream luxury economy is predicated on the mandate of perpetual volume and acceleration. Poell chooses deceleration and radical constraint, ensuring his high financial valuation is derived not from volume, but from irreversible cultural influence and perceived rarity. This transforms his scarcity into a political act of resistance against the traditional economic system. His refusal to chase market demand or adhere to external calendars aligns directly with the idea of the artisan as activist, where conscious limitation of production is a philosophical statement against the growth-oriented system. Poell demonstrates that profound, enduring value can be sustained through uncompromising quality and conceptual integrity, rather than mass expansion. Performance as systemic critique. The morgue, the slaughterhouse, and mainstream downstream Poell's presentations are not conventional fashion shows but theatrical manifestos of his philosophical and political position. He deliberately uses highly provocative and disturbing venues that equate the consumption cycle with institutional decay. Past presentations have included models caged in dog kennels, hidden under sheets in a morgue, or staged in a slaughterhouse. The most potent example of this systemic critique was his spring 2004 collection, Mainstream Downstream. The presentation featured 17 dead models floating in a canal, a dramatic tableau explicitly designed to mock the state of mainstream fashion, devoid of meaning and the emptiness we are moving into. This literalizes the industry's state of exhaustion. By using imagery of death, decay, and institutional processing, Poell equates the rapid, meaningless cycle of fashion with a kind of conceptual entropy. The floating models are a visceral metaphor for the commodified body and the artist's work being swept away by the current of consumerism, forcing the viewer to confront the stark reality of the material origins, the slaughterhouse, that the commercial system attempts to sanitize and forget. These performances function as necessary, unsettling interruptions to the mainstream narrative. The legacy of the philosophical architect. The remainder of this study continues at objectsofaffectioncollection.com. This has been a study from the Objects of Affection collection, a critical art research institution operating under the framework of post-luxury conceptual functional art. Read the full research at objectsofaffectioncollection.com.